welcome back to my channel Tutelage, a guide to learner. Here, this is Sriparna. Hope all of you are doing good. So, we have already discussed with you all the different parts of teaching aptitude for a long time, but we will explain today the different type concept of research aptitude. And you all know research aptitude will help candidates not only in the preparation of the NTA UGC Net paper 1 but also it will be equally important for their academic journey, which will start with MPhil or PhD degree. And undoubtedly research aptitude is important as it is part of syllabus of NET exam. And usually there are 5 to 6 questions from this topic. It should be kept in mind. It is not just important from the examination perspective, but also the knowledge or experience of research will be helpful in teaching as well. So and it will help. So this chapter will help teachers in staying up to date with the latest developments in their subjects. So that's why this chapter is equally important for all of you. Okay. If you have missed my previous session, so please go and check it once. And all previous sessions links are given in my first comment and in my description box. I hope all sessions will be a very useful session to everyone. Okay. Today's session is going to be a fourth session on research aptitude. So if you have any doubt on it, so please check my previous sessions, and we have already told that thing. And if there is any doubt, please feel free to ask in my comment section. I will reply you. So let's begin the session. So learner, in my last session we haven't completed my total scheduled topic due to time. So that's why we will explain today the steps of research, concept of variables, and most important the types of variables, because in my last session we have already mentioned the definition of variables and the differences between variable and attributes, but today we will explain the types of variables and their definition. And last but not the least, the concept of hypothesis and the types of hypothesis, null hypothesis, and the alternative hypothesis and data collection process. I hope this session will be a great helpful session to everyone. So let's begin the session and move on the main slide. So, learner, this session starts with steps of research. So, before going to the discussion on steps of research or the different steps of research, we have to know what do you mean by research. So, research means plus search. Okay, so what do you mean by re means again, anew, or over again, and search means to examine closely and carefully. So that's why in simple words research can be defined as the in-depth study of something in search of some new information. We have already told that part in my previous session. So if you have missed my previous session, so please go and check it once. My previous session's link is in my description box and my first comment. I hope this session will be a very helpful session to you. Okay, so now move on to the main thing, that is steps of research. According to the Clifford Woody, research comprises the following steps. The first step, that is select a topic. So the first step is to choose a topic. So this is not an easy or quick task. Researchers can start with selection a broad topic, and research will be more enjoyable if researchers develop interest in the topic. So the some points should be kept in mind always while choosing a research topic. So the first point, the topic should not be too narrow or too vague. Number two, researcher should be familiar with the topic. Number three, the topic should be feasible. Okay. So research guide or experts in the field can be consulted to know about the feasibility of the topic. So feasibility is one of the most important criteria while choosing a perfect research topic. So feasibility of topic is mandatory. Number 4, there should be scope of new discovery in the field. If too much work has already been done on that topic, then there will be a lesser scope for a new discovery of something or perspective. So there is a problem. So that's why there will arise a problem. So, number fifth, if the field is relatively new, then a preliminary study should be always conducted. So, this before actually starting the research, the researchers have to choose the topic and consult available literature and expertise and list out the broad objectives. So, in step one, while choosing a topic, some points should be kept in mind. The first one, topic should not be too narrow or too vague. Number two, researchers should be familiar with the topic. The topic should be feasible. Number three. Number four, there should be scope of new discovery in the field. Number five, if the field is relatively new, then a preliminary study should be conducted. And after choosing a topic, please do list out the broad objectives of the topic. Okay, so now move on to the second step. So now move on to the second point, that is define the research problem. So after choosing the topic, having a list of a broad objectives of research, so the next step is to define the research problem. So at first we have to know what do you mean by a research problem. So research problem basically a statement, okay, which introduces the topic of research, explains the problem, situation, or an activity for which solution is to be obtained through research. I think this is clear. So now move on to the next step, that is review the literature. So this is one of the most important steps of research also. So the third step is comprehensive literature review. So literature, we have already told, literature review is a very important step of research. It involves analysis of books, journals, articles, documentaries, etc., which is related to the topic of research. It will familiarize researchers with works already done in the field of the study, methodologies used and results derived, shortcomings, etc. So it should be organized, precisely summarized, and well narrated. So it will broaden the knowledge in the area of research and also provides the clarity. So it helps to clarify the whole research topic. That's why this is very important. So now move on to the third step, that is develop the objectives. Okay, so in the first step, those objectives will be something will be different from the this one. Okay, after having completed the literature review, the researcher will have a better understanding of what he would like to contribute uh, to the topic, as he or she is aware of what is known and unknown about the topic. So there is a need of modifying the objectives accordingly. Objectives should be complete and clearly specified. I think this is clear. So now move on to the fifth step, that is identify variables and formulate hypothesis. So, one of the most important steps of research is to identify variables of the study and formulate the hypothesis. And in my last session, we have already told what is the meaning of variables and the differences between variables and attribute. So, today we will explain the different types of variables in my next slide. Okay, so now move on to the and hypothesis. We will explain hypothesis, the concept of hypothesis too, so in later. So now move on to the next slide for this, for knowing the steps of sixth step of research. So here we can see the sixth step, and this is one of the most important step of research, that is preparing the research design. So I think all things we have already told that part, all are uh, clear to everyone. Okay, so the sixth step, that is to prepare the research design. Till now, topic, research problem, its objective, variables have been decided. Hypothesis is formulated after a detailed review of literature. So now uh, the need is to finalize other details, such as what kind of data is required, what will be its time period, how will data to be collected, and what will be the sample size, and how will data be analyzed, and so on. So all these things are related to the research design. So uh, after formulating the hypothesis, we have to prepare the research design, and what kind of data, required data, time period, how will data be collected, what is the sample size of the study, all are related to the sixth step of research, that is preparing the research design. Okay, so now move on. We have already known there are different types of research design: exploratory research design, explanatory, quantitative, qualitative, longitudinal, one time, cross sectional. So uh, all things we have already uh, discussed to everyone. So if you have missed my previous sessions, so please go and check it once. I hope it will really be a helpful session to everyone. So now move on to the next step. So the next step, that is carry out sampling. Okay, so at first we have to know what do you mean by sampling. So suppose we consider a study is conducted to know if college students from Amritsar prefer healthy food over junk food. So for this study, the population from whom data can be collected is all the college students from Amritsar. But the problem is that it will not be feasible to ask every college students about his or her preference. Here, the need for choosing a sample from the whole population. So sample should be chosen in such a way that is true representative of the total population, and this is known as sampling. And sampling is also used in our daily life as well. So one such example is of cooking. While cooking vegetables, instead of checking each and every slice of vegetables or rice, we check a few pieces. And if those are cooked, then we generalize the vegetables. All vegetables are cooked. Okay, so similar is the case with research. We study a sample instead of the whole population, and then the results of the analysis are generalized to the whole population as the sample. So that's why we can say sample is the true representative of the population. I think what do you mean by a sample? This is clear to everyone. So now move on to the next step, that is collect the data. So after sampling, we have data. We have after sampling, we know what is a sampling process. What is the process to collect data. So that's why the next step in research is the collection of data. Data required for verifying a hypothesis, verifying a formulated hypothesis can be collected originally by the researcher, or it can be extracted from the data already available. So data collection. So data, we are already known there are different types of data. So primary data and secondary data, and this thing we will discuss in later. So now move on to the next step, that is data analysis and hypothesis testing. So the next step is to draw conclusions from the data collected so as to answer the research questions and to verify the established hypothesis. For these, the raw data collected needs to be processed and then it can be analyzed manually or with the help of softwares for data management such as Microsoft Excel and Access, Microsoft Access, and the statistical analysis tools like SPSS, R, Stata, and so on. So that's why this is very important, and hypothesis testing. So there some of the commonly used data analysis techniques, that is frequency, percentage. We have already known, we have already discussed the measures of central tendency. It includes mean, standard deviation, percentage, correlations, regressions, etc. So I think this is clear. And what is the meaning of mean, correlation, regression, standard deviation, etc. So now going to the next step, that is generalization and interpretation. If in testing of hypothesis it has been supported by the data several times, then it can be used for generalization and thus for formulating theories. So this way the research will be used to solve real life problems. If there was no hypothesis established, then the findings of the study can be explained in this step. There are higher chance of generalizability if the sample chosen from the population was representative of the population. So we have already told sample is the true representative of population. Okay, and last but not the least, the last important step of research, that is writing a research report. So in a research report, the researcher has to explain the topic of research, its objectives, variables, hypotheses, as well the methods that have been used in the research, and also mention what data was required, sources of data, data analysis, and then the generalization and interpretation of the data. So all things are included in the research report. So that's why research report is also one of the most important steps of research. In the beginning section of the research report, its title, acknowledgement, background, abstract, index, list of tables, list of figures, list of appendix, introduction, aims, objectives of the study are mentioned. The following sections are on review of literature. So at first we have to write um what what thing we will write, that is different types of that at first we have to write the its title of the study, acknowledgement, background, abstract, list of tables and figures, introduction, aims and objectives of the study, and after that we have to mention the review of literature, methodology, and findings of the study. Okay, and in the third part, the conclusion, summary, recommendations, references, etc. form the concluding part of the report. Okay, so this is discussed. I think this is clear. So what thing we are we have to include the for writing a research report. So basically you have to we have to know all things, all required things, all data, all design, all figures on uh, hypotheses, formulated hypotheses, variables, research design, and the conclusions, generalization, interpretations. All things are included in the research report. So this is the last step of research, and I think all the research steps are clear to everyone. So if you have any doubt on it, so please feel free to ask in my comment section. I will reply you. So now move on to the next slide. So here we can see the different types of variable, and we have already told variables basically can be measured is a, so any entity which can be measured, which can be measurable, which is known as variable. So here we can see different types of variables. The first one is continuous variables, second one is discrete, third one is dependent, extraneous, fourth one, and last one, that is independent variable. So let us explain the all types of variable. So now move on to the next slide. Here we can see different types of variables like continuous variables, discrete variable, dependent variable, extraneous variable and independent variable. Let us explain all types of variables and move on the next slide. So here this is the definition of dependent variable and independent variable. Okay. So dependent variable is a variable which is under the influence of another variable because the variable is dependent on another. So dependent variable basically indicates such type of variable which is under the influence of another variable or which is affected by another variable of the system. Okay, so those variable is under influence of another variable which is known as dependent variable. Clear? And now move on to the next type, that is independent variable. So independent variable is a such type of a variable which is not under the influence of another variable, which is totally independent in nature. So that is the basic differences between dependent variable and independent variable. Because dependent variable is under the influence of the another variable, depends on another variable, and independent variable is not under the influence of any other variable in the series. Uh, we consider y equals to function of x, and this is the very common equation in economics. So here we can see y, the variable y is the dependent variable. Okay, because y, the value of y depends on the value of x. So in this equation, x is the independent variable because x in any time x the value of x increases or decreases. So that's why it is independent in nature. So the variable x is not under the influence of the another variable like y. So x is the independent variable and the value of y is basically dependent on the value of x. So that's why y is the dependent variable and it is under the influence of the another variable like x. I think the difference between dependent variable and independent variable and the what is the actual meaning of dependent and independent variable is clear to everyone. So now move on to the next slide where we can see there are three types of variable like continuous variable, discrete variable and the extraneous variable. Just a minute, learner. Sorry. Okay, so let's begin. So here at first we have to discuss the continuous variable. Okay, so what is the meaning of continuous variable? Continuous variable is a such type of variable which can be expressed continuously. So those variable can be expressed continuously, that is in decimals as well. Like the example of the continuous variable like weight. So the weight of a person, we consider weight of a person 55.8. Okay, 55.8 kg. So is the weight of a particular person or an individual. So these number 55.8, this number can be expressed continuously. So this variable is called continuous variable. Okay, now move on to the next type, that is non-continuous or discrete variable. So discrete variable is a such type of variable which can only be expressed as a whole numbers only, not in decimals as well in the continuous variable. So those number can only be expressed as a whole number like 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on. So example of the discrete variable, that is number of uh, patients in the hospital. So what is number of patient is in any hospital, that is 55, not 58 or whatever, but not uh, the number of patient is not 58.5, 60.5, which is basically the continuous variables. So number of patient is not the continuous variable. It is always the discrete variable and it is expressed as a whole number only, that is like 100, 120, 140, etc. So now move on to the next one, that is the extraneous variable. So what do you mean by extraneous variable, learner? So these are the variables which have an effect on the dependent variable but which is not part of the system, which is not part of the study. Okay, so we consider, for example, the sleeping hours and time taken to complete task. There can be many other variables which affect the time taken to complete the task, such as the mood of the employee, his willingness to complete it, and any other work he has, his health, etc. Because in this study, we have to check only the effect of sleeping hours on working efficiency, and other variables like his willingness, health, all variables, all other variables have been excluded from this system. So these variables are known as extraneous variables. So basically extraneous variable is a variable which have an effect on the dependent variable and which is not part of the system. I think the concept of extraneous variable and different types of variable like continuous, discrete and the dependent, independent, all are clear to everyone. So now going to the next slide, and here we can see the hypothesis, the concept of hypothesis. Okay, so basically learner, concept hypothesis is a tentative statement. Okay, tentative statement, clear, and which will be checked through data analysis, and that's why we can say data analysis is also an important step of research. Okay, so here we can see the definition of the hypothesis. So according to Bailey, a hypothesis is a proposition in a testable form and predicts a particular relationship between two or more variables. Okay, so, each and hypothesis should be stated before conducting the research, as stating the hypothesis gives a direction to research. So that's why we can say it predicts a particular relationship, because it helps to give a direction to research also. As said above, hypothesis predict the association or between two or more variables. So it will provide some idea about the variables and the kind of data needed to prove whether the predicted relationship exists or not. So I think this process will save time and resources which can otherwise be wasted in collecting irrelevant data. So that's why formulating correct formulating hypothesis is also a very important step of research, because without hypothesis the research is impossible. So that's why hypothesis making is also a very important step of research. So I think this is clear what is the actual meaning of hypothesis, and now move on to the next slide, and here we can see types of hypothesis also only. So but in my next session we will explain the functions of hypothesis and the characteristics of hypothesis and etc. But today we only discuss uh, types of hypothesis, and here we can see there are two types of hypothesis. One is null hypothesis and another one is alternative hypothesis, and both are very important in both concept are very important in economics, because here here in this chapter basically education is related to the statistics, because probability, hypothesis, all concepts are taken from the subject statistics. Okay, so now move on to the next slide and uh, take a look at the concept of null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. So now move on to the first concept, that is a null hypothesis. So what do you mean by a null hypothesis, learner? So null hypothesis is a base of a study. So what is the actual meaning of null hypothesis? It is the base of study. Okay, base of study. Clear? And this signifies there is no difference between two phenomenon, two situation, or two variables. And null hypothesis is denoted by H naught. This is not this is called H naught. Okay, so null hypothesis indicates there is no relation, there is no difference. All variables, both variables are same. There is no difference between two situation or two variables. And now move on to the next hypothesis, that is alternative hypothesis. And alternative hypothesis is denoted by H1. So H naught is null hypothesis is denoted by H naught and alternative hypothesis is denoted by H1. And alternative hypothesis basically signifies there is difference between two situations. So null hypothesis indicates there is no difference and alternative hypothesis indicates there is a significant difference between two situation or two variables, etc. I think what do you mean by a null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis is clear. Null hypothesis means there is no difference and alternative hypothesis means there is a significant difference between two variables. That is the basic differences between null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. I think this concept is clear to everyone. So, learner, we are done for the today's session. I hope this session will be a very useful to you. If you like my session, do not forget to share, comment, and like. Most importantly, like. So please do some support and subscribe my channel for getting more useful sessions. I will come again with a new session. Till then, stay tuned. Thank you to all of you. Happy learning. Keep commenting.